The nation was changed by World War II. Armed with experience in leadership, innovative thinking, and the can-do ethic, returning soldiers and war-tested civilians had little patience for attitudes of, "That's just the way we do things." A new dynamism came out in various ways. An ambitious educator began what would become the city's third college. Dr. Lucinda Macaulay Harris had a dream to educate African Americans to succeed in the world of business. Harris left her job teaching high school to open Macaulay's Business School in 1947. At first, she taught typewriting to a handful of students in a space above the Scarborough Funeral Home. Many of her early students were veterans using the GI Bill to train themselves for civilian jobs. 2 years after starting, Harris incorporated her school as Durham Business College. Growth continued, and by the mid-1960s, the school was a residential junior college with a 21,000 square foot building on Fayetteville Street and a student body representing 9 states plus Liberia and Nigeria. In 1971, the name changed to Durham College. Harris served as college president until 1974. The college continued until closing in 1980, educating more than 5,000 students as accountants, administrators, computer operators, medical technologists, court reporters, executive secretaries, and fashion merchandisers. Durham College had such stature that in 1977, Muhammad Ali came for the dedication of a new gymnasium that had been named in his honor. By 1950, both citizens had formed a choral society, community theater, and art guild. In 1953, the Veterans Administration Hospital received its first patient, and a new housing authority opened its first apartment developments, Few Gardens in East Durham for whites, and McDougall Terrace near Hayti for blacks. In sports, there was a new track team at North Carolina College, thanks to Dr. Leroy Taschereau Walker. Leroy Walker was a trailblazer in athletics. He coached competitors in every Olympic Games from 1956 through 1976 and became the first U.S. African-American Olympic head coach. He led a 1976 track and field team that brought home 6 gold medals. In 1992, Walker became president of the U.S. Olympic Committee, bringing the 1996 Games to his hometown of Atlanta. Walker grew up there and in Harlem, then went to Benedict College in South Carolina on an athletic scholarship. He was not only a star in football and basketball, but a magna cum laude graduate. He went on to earn graduate degrees at Columbia and New York University. He came to Durham in 1945 to coach football and basketball and organized North Carolina Central's first track and field team. In his career, he coached 111 All-Americans, 40 national champions, and 12 Olympic champions. That career took a turn in 1983 when University of North Carolina System President William Friday named Walker interim chancellor of North Carolina Central University, a position he held for 3 years. Upon Walker's death in 2012, Friday remembered him as, quote, "a remarkable human being, a great teacher, a great leader. I don't know of a man who's had a greater impact in his world than did Leroy," unquote. The post-World War II decade brought expansion at both the American and Liggett Myers tobacco factories, which had supplied 1/4 of America's cigarettes during the war. Liggett's expansion produced a spectacle as the company offices were moved across Main Street with all hands aboard as electricity, telephones, and even the restrooms were kept connected through the move. Politics, too, were changing. Duke graduate John Leslie Atkins led a civic campaign for a new bus station downtown. Recognizing the political potential in a combination of black voters and organized labor, Atkins put together a coalition of the Durham Committee, union members, and a number of white liberals. In the 1949 mayor's race, the coalition propelled a decorated veteran, Dan K. Edwards, to victory over longtime city councilman Aubrey Wiggins. 2 years later, when Edwards left to become an assistant secretary of defense, coalition backing helped elect Jewish businessman E.J. Mutt Evans as mayor. Also elected were the first female council members, Catherine Everett and Mary Duke Biddle Trent, who later added Siemens to her name. Mary Siemens was an heiress you were just as likely to run into at a sandwich shop or grocery store as at a charity affair or board meeting. A great-granddaughter of Washington Duke, she spent her childhood in New York, but came to Durham as a teenager and made this city her home for the rest of her life. Mary was a public-spirited philanthropist and compassionate advocate for education, the arts, human rights, and social justice. Quote, "We are all here for each other," Siemens once said. "I take very seriously this business of treating your neighbor as yourself, trying to be your brother's keeper. They're solid maxims for life." Serving on the city council and as mayor pro tem, she was a trustee of Lincoln Community Hospital, co-founder of the Durham Arts Council and of the North Carolina School of the Arts. Carrying on her family's legacy, Siemens was a trustee, vice president, and president of the Duke Endowment, a trustee of Duke University, and of the Mary Duke Biddle Foundation, established by her mother. Duke University awarded Siemens its Medal for Distinguished Meritorious Service. She also received the National Brotherhood Award of the National Conference of Christians and Jews. Truly, former Mayor Bill Bell once said, Mrs. Siemens represented the heart and the goodness of Durham. While Mary Siemens was a city council member, Durham elected its first African-American councilman, Rencher N. Harris, in 1953, a year ahead of the momentous Brown versus the Board of Education decision that led to school desegregation. The Labor-Black Liberal coalition broke apart over that Supreme Court ruling, but it had established the African-American vote as a decisive factor in Durham elections. 1957 proved a milestone year in Durham's civil rights story. April saw the Durham Bulls field their first black players, but black spectators were blocked from integrating the stands. Duke University announced that 3 black teachers would be attending a summer program on campus. The Ministers' Alliance passed a resolution against racial segregation and called on faith communities to take the initiative in creating a community free of discrimination.
It's been a long time.
In June, Durham saw its first civil rights sit-in as 7 young African Americans and Minister Douglas Moore took seats in the white section of the Royal Ice Cream Parlor and refused to leave without service. The demonstrators were arrested for trespassing and fined. Later in 1957, 2 black parents brought suit to have their daughters admitted to all-white Durham High. The first token school desegregation came 2 years later. With the energy and determination of a rising generation of African Americans, as well as a determined white mayor, Wentz Corberick, the city's theaters, restaurants, and park facilities dropped white-only policies before the end of 1963. Women's liberation had not come into national consciousness yet, but a woman had achieved a first at North Carolina Mutual. Viola Turner, a Mutual employee since 1920, had become the company's first female vice president in 1960 and won election as the first woman on Mutual's board of directors. Turner was born in poverty in Macon, Georgia, but had encouraging parents and a personal drive to uplift herself. She studied business at Morris Brown College in Atlanta, then went to work as a secretary, first at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, next for the Mississippi Superintendent of Negro Education. Working for North Carolina Mutual in the field, she helped establish branch offices in Mississippi, Arkansas, and Oklahoma before applying for and getting a transfer to the home office in Durham. She soon became personal secretary to the president, C.C. Spaulding. Showing a natural aptitude for finance, Turner gained more and more authority. After confronting management on equal pay with men doing similar work, she found herself in charge of Mutual's investment portfolio. With her own skill and nurtured contacts in New York's financial circles, she added millions of dollars to the company's assets. In 1957, she was named North Carolina Mutual's treasurer and retired in 1965. Science and technology were ascendant in the early 60s with the dawning of the space age, and a new future was in the making for the Durham Children's Museum when Richard G.M. Westcott joined the staff. Dick Westcott was a native Londoner who, as a boy, saw an exhibit on dinosaurs. It was the beginning of a lifelong fascination he would bring to what became, under his direction, the North Carolina Museum of Life and Science. After Royal Navy service in World War II, Westcott came to the United States with his American wife, Margie Louise Grimes. Several years later, they came to Durham, and Westcott went to work as the Children's Museum curator. Trained as a commercial artist, Westcott and some helpers built a prehistory trail with 20 life-size models of dinosaurs in the woods off Murray Avenue. Becoming museum director in 1971, he made contacts with other museums and with the space program that brought the museum one of the country's best collections of aerospace memorabilia. A Redstone rocket, Project Mercury space capsule, and a Project Apollo lunar lander are among the museum's Westcott legacies, along with more earthbound features such as a vintage railroad caboose. Westcott left Durham in the late 1970s, but his vision and leadership set the museum on a course of growth and development that has continued to the present day. Back in the 1950s, not too many people could have foreseen how big a part medicine and science would play in the Bold City's economic future. But there were visionaries who saw opportunity in what Greensboro businessman Romeo Guest dubbed the research triangle of Duke, the University of North Carolina, and what is now North Carolina State University. With support from some state business leaders and Governor Luther Hodges, the three schools incorporated the Research Triangle Foundation in 1958. Groundbreaking for the Research Triangle Park's first tenant came the following year. By 1970, 21 companies had located research facilities in the park, including the industrial giant IBM. The Research Triangle idea was slow to catch on with Durham, where many business and civic leaders assumed that any benefits would flow to the state capital of Raleigh. The mills and factories kept turning out cloth and cigarettes, but industry-as-usual complacency ignored a subtle decline. Durham's industrial employment fell 19% from 1947 to 1959, and Durham's average weekly wage was the lowest among North Carolina's 5 largest cities. Retail sales were lagging, and by 1960, new shopping centers were drawing trade away from the congested downtown. Alarmed, business people and elected officials determined to do something and came up with a plan to remodel downtown with a new government complex and a loop road to funnel traffic around the city center, with federal urban renewal funding to remove aging buildings and stimulate reconstruction. Much of Hayti was also slated for remodeling, while a new freeway connecting downtown with the Research Triangle Park was laid out to run through the community's commercial heart. The early 60s were an era of out with the old and in with the new. The prospect of building new with public aid gained African American support that was crucial in approving bond issues for both Haty's renewal and the freeway. But the promised renewal never happened. Hundreds of businesses and homes were demolished. Urban renewal became urban removal, and housing became a late 60s flashpoint for a renewed civil rights movement that gave voices to the poor and underserved. The freeway, NC 147, became a symbol of promises unkept, and urban renewal left an enduring legacy of bitterness and distrust. R. Kelly Bryant helped keep the memory of Hayti fresh. He did not think of himself as a historical preservationist, but if you ask him about Durham's black history, you'd better be ready to sit a while and listen, for Bryant was the city's griot. "My memory is like a jukebox," he once said. He put that memory and his massive collection of local history documents to use in any number of preservation projects. The Geer Cemetery restoration, Harris Street revitalization, oral history of the civil rights movement, panel appearances, and speeches. Bryant grew up in Rocky Mount, but his Durham roots were deep. His grandmother was White Rock Baptist Church founder Margaret Ruffin Fawcett. He came to live in Durham in 1941 and worked for 40 years at Mutual Savings and Loan, then at NC Mutual Life. A civic-minded man, he was at one time or another a White Rock trustee, secretary of the Durham Business and Professional Chain, a member of the Human Relations Commission, and the Open Spaces and Trails Commission, a Mason, a precinct judge, and a Boy Scout leader. In 2006, Preservation Durham presented Bryant its highest honor, the Bartlett Durham Award, for his outstanding leadership and sustained involvement in preserving Durham history. Jane Goodrich, a member of the committee that chose Bryant for the award, said that he had, quote, that extra oomph. It's not only that he's got the information, she said, but he's got the great humane understanding of what it all meant. With visions of renewal on their minds, municipal authorities also concerned themselves with a limited resource, the city's water supply. Durham had agreed to supply the Research Triangle Park with water, and officials of the growing city realized that they would need to supplement the city's Flat River Reservoir, Lake Mickey. Their plan to create a Lake Eno sounded progressive to some, but alarming to others, who liked the pristine Eno River and its wooded valley as it was. In 1966, Margaret Nygaard, as formidable a figure as ever took on a city council, founded the Association for the Preservation of the Eno River Valley with others who lived along or enjoyed the river. Together, they set out to convince the public of the stream's value with a regular series of nature hikes and talks with anyone who would listen. Eventually, City Hall came to think the conservationists might have something in their idea of a public park along the river. The city bought land and set about developing what became West Point on the Eno. Nygaard and her allies successfully pressed North Carolina authorities to create what is now the Eno River State Park, part of 7,000 acres of protected natural land and water. In the late 1960s, African American rights and social justice became flashpoints at Duke University, where tension from student activism led President Douglas M. Knight to resign. To replace him in 1969, the Duke trustees turned to a University of North Carolina graduate, former Governor Terry Sanford. Sanford quickly restored a degree of trust and amicability between students and the administration, and as president over the next 16 years, set Duke on the course to becoming an internationally renowned institution. He established close relationships with Durham's civic and business leaders and was instrumental in bringing the American Dance Festival to Durham in 1978. A native of Laurinburg, Sanford served as a U.S. Army paratroop lieutenant during World War II, receiving a Bronze Star, and as a National Guard captain after the war. As North Carolina's governor from 1961 to 1965, Sanford nearly doubled spending on public schools and oversaw creation of the community college system. He also initiated the North Carolina Fund, an innovative anti-poverty program. While at Duke, Sanford launched two unsuccessful campaigns for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. After leaving the university, he ran successfully for the U.S. Senate, where he served from 1986 until 1993. As governor, university president, and senator, Sanford was a major progressive figure of the post-World War II South. By the time Sanford arrived at Duke and Durham, the university and the city were achieving renown in a new field, dieting. Dr. Walter Kempner had come to Duke Medical School in the 30s as a refugee from Nazi Germany. Researching cardiovascular disease and treatment, he found that a regimen of rice, fruit juice, and vitamins was effective in treating high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney failure, and some other disorders. His patients also lost a considerable amount of weight. In the mid-1940s, he began treatment for overweight alone. Word got around, and Kempner's practice grew to the point that he opened the Rice House, a boarding house and clinic on Mangum Street near downtown. Publicity in national magazines attracted rotund celebrities such as comedian Buddy Hackett, actor Lorne Greene, Colonel Harlan T. Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken fame, and, legend insists, the king himself, Elvis Presley. Today, the Rice Diet Healthcare Program continues, as well as several other health and weight loss enterprises that the entrepreneurial doctor inspired in the City of Medicine.
what my favorite Kevin Costner movie of all time is?
Bull Durham.
Bull Durham! Yes! Gosh, I love that movie because, as you might be able to tell from what I have on, I love the Bulls. My dad was a season ticket holder, and the Bulls are what we did in the summer. My whole family eating hot dogs and funnel cakes, singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" in the 7th ending stretch. Dave Justice was my favorite Bull of all time. Like him, I'm a lefty. I played in high school, and I got a partial scholarship to play softball at Georgia Tech. And then I worked at IBM in Atlanta for a while, and I'd go to Braves games, wearing my Bull gear. The Braves had some decent teams back then, but I'd still rather be in Durham. You know, guys who are fighting for a dream, they play harder than guys who've achieved their dream. First chance I got to transfer to RTP, I did. And now, I'm a season ticket holder, and I take my whole family to the games. Yeah! Look, Durham is in my blood, and I'm gonna make damn sure that it's in my kids' blood too. Hey, I'm Kate, by the way, and I hope to see all of you at the ballpark. Ow!
Yes, that's right. I'll have the paperwork drawn up this afternoon. Take care now. Sorry, a friend of mine just bought some property, and I'm handling the closing. She's opening a new Peruvian restaurant. We actually have choices now, with Latin American cuisine, with grocery stores too. It feels good to see Durham growing, culturally expanding. My kids' experiences are way different than the ones I had growing up here. When I was a kid, there weren't many kids that looked like me. On Sundays, we go to Duke Gardens and be the only Latino family there. Now, there are all kinds of families from all origins going to enjoy the beauty of that place on any Sunday the sun is shining. I think it's a metaphor for Durham. All of us coming together to enjoy the beauty of what we are building together. We have fights. Families fight. We have many challenges as a city, but challenges build character. My father came here from Mexico with nothing. Now he owns his own construction business, and his son, Miguel Gonzalez, who is a proud NCCU law student, and practicing attorney, takes his family to Duke Gardens on Sunday, keeping that tradition. You see, people come here with dreams, and they make those dreams a reality. That's the story of this place. That is a tradition of the Bull City. So throw your bulls up, as they say! Vamos!
Funga a la fia, ashe, ashe. Funga a la fia, ashe, ashe. Funga a la fia, we welcome you. Funga a la fia, ashe, ashe. I won't lie, I was a little scared to move to Durham. It wasn't so much Durham as it was North Carolina. I am a gay black woman from Philly. Jesse Helms was your senator when I first moved here. So again, my decision to move here wasn't easy. But my partner was like, it's only for a year. You can do it for a year. For the chance to dance with Chuck Davis. I met Baba Chuck at an African dance workshop during the American Dance Festival at Duke. He saw me dance and I told him I was looking for a company at the time. A year turned into 2 years. My partner got a job at Duke and 2 years turned into the rest of my life. I never thought I'd find community here. I was so wrong. But still, I worry. I worry about the future of my adopted city.
See, some of the same things I see happening here, I saw happening back in Philly. My friends in Atlanta are seeing them there. The G word, basically, gentrification. For some, that word means economic opportunity. For others, that word means removal. Simple as that. But it's not simple as that, is it? There's more foot traffic in downtown Durham than I remember. There are bars, art walks, hell, Broadway shows, live music, restaurants, renovated hotels. But as great as all that is, we now have people who cannot afford to live in the places that they have lived their entire lives. People who built the very culture that attracted many of these businesses to the area in the first place. That is a problem, and it must be solved. Change is an unstoppable force, but I don't believe it has to be an uncontrolled, unstoppable force. It can be planned for and guided. Like Baba Chuck always taught, we must have peace, love, respect for everybody. Peace, love, respect for everybody. If we keep those words at our center, if we hold those words at the core of every decision that we make as we stand trying to stay steady, swaying in these winds of change, if we hold Baba Chuck's words at our core, we will flourish. That is not something I feel, that is something I know. Ashe? Ashe.
Racial tensions that built up during the 1960s were still high when a federal district court ordered immediate desegregation of Durham City schools during the 1970-71 school year. Integration had been advancing, but too slowly under a policy of neighborhood assignment. To try to ease the process and establish communication between blacks and whites, citizens arranged for a 10-day series of meetings called Save Our Schools. Two individuals were nominated as co-chairs: Ann Atwater, an outspoken black activist, and Claiborne Paul Ellis, exalted Grand Cyclops of the Durham Ku Klux Klan. Born to a sharecropper family in rural Columbus County, Ann Atwater had come to Durham in the early 1950s. Struggling with poverty herself, she became a powerful advocate for improved housing and made herself an authority on housing policy. C.P. Ellis grew up in Durham. The son of a textile mill worker who had been a Klansman, Ellis knew poverty firsthand for most of his life, and he found acceptance and empowerment when he joined the Klan and rose within its ranks. Atwater and Ellis despised each other when they agreed to lead Save Our Schools, but soon found that they had much in common in their financial struggles and their concern for the welfare of Durham school children. Over 10 days in the summer of 1971, their animosity turned to grudging respect and then a deep friendship that lasted the rest of their lives. Ellis publicly tore up his Klan membership card and went on to become a labor organizer. Atwater continued to work on behalf of poor people and became a resident liaison with the Durham Housing Authority. Their story has become the subject of a book, documentary, stage play, and a feature motion picture released earlier this year, The Best of Enemies. It was also in 1971 that Durham born and raised artist Ernie Barnes settled in California and conceived an exhibition that he called The Beauty of the Ghetto. Barnes described it as a pictorial background for understanding into the aesthetics of Black America. The 35-painting exhibition premiered in 1972 and went on a 7-year tour of museums across the country. Television producer Norman Lear chose one of the paintings, Sugar Shack, for the opening credits of his sitcom Good Times. Born in Hayti, Barnes turned a childhood interest in art into an acclaimed career as an adult, while simultaneously pursuing a career in professional sports. A track and football star, as well as an art major at North Carolina Central University, he played 5 seasons with the San Diego Chargers and Denver Broncos and gained the nickname Big Rembrandt. He retired from football in 1965 to pursue his art full-time, first in New York, then Los Angeles, where he spent the rest of his life. He was appointed official artist for the 1984 Olympic Games. Among his commissions were paintings for the Carolina Panthers and the National Basketball Association. His last public exhibition in 2007 was called A Tribute to Artist and NFL alumni Ernie Barnes, sponsored by Time Warner and the National Football League. In Durham in the early 70s, the first section of the freeway opened from Chapel Hill Street to Alston Avenue. Construction got underway for the downtown loop and clearances for urban renewal. The changing urban landscape and loss of iconic structures such as the Italianate Union Station upset many Durham residents and led to the 1974 formation of the Historic Preservation Society, now Preservation Durham, which soon gained more than 500 members. The group's first project was preserving the 18th century Benehan House at Stagville. That same year, Allied Arts of Durham, now the Durham Arts Council, brought some spark to the declining downtown with its first Streets Arts Festival, now Centerfest. That first festival's single stage was on Main Street beside the county Republican headquarters. Looking ahead, Mayor Jim Hawkins formed a committee to plan the city's celebration of the National Bicentennial. The result was a 3-day festival of North Carolina folklife at the just-opened West Point on the Eno Park. It drew a crowd reckoned at 50,000 in July of 1976. That festival provided inspiration for the Eno River Association's annual Festival for the Eno. 1977 brought Durham Day, a celebration of downtowns being put on the National Register of Historic Places. But a historic-themed parade on Main Street passed empty storefronts and a pile of rubble where Belk's department store had long stood. Belk's, like Sears before it, had joined a flow from the city center to a shopping mall. Also gone to the malls were former downtown movie houses. The Carolina Theater was the last to go, closed after the operator's lease expired. When it appeared the Carolina would be torn down to make way for a parking deck, Monty and Connie Moses had to do something about it. With about 25 others, they formed the nonprofit Carolina Cinema Corporation and gained city council approval to lease the building for showing foreign and art movies. Carolina Cinema secured loans from the city and a bank, and in June of 1978, reopened with a Charlie Chaplin Film Festival. Montrose J. Moses was a cell biologist at Duke Medical School. Connie Moses had a professional background in radio and theater. Both had indulged a taste for art movies while living in New York. After moving to Durham in 1959, they were regular patrons of the foreign films featured at the downtown Rialto Theater, which itself was demolished for a new judicial building. Educated at Bates College and Columbia University, Monty had been a U.S. Army captain during World War II. Afterwards, he worked at the Brookhaven National Laboratory on the nature of DNA. His discovery of a protein structure called the synaptonemal complex gained him international recognition, but he is also remembered as a man of multiple talents, including puppetry, sailing, carpentry, and magic. Once the Carolina was saved from demolition, Connie Moses became the driving force in its restoration. Through the late 70s and 1980s, she led great numbers of volunteers in cleaning, clearing, and refreshing the 1926 Beaux-Arts building, particularly the ballroom, whose windows still bore blackout paint from World War II. That ballroom now bears her name. The revived Carolina Theater was joined downtown by the Durham Arts Council, which moved from its former home at Vickers Avenue and Proctor Street into the former City Hall on Morris Street in 1978. The year before, city government had moved to its new quarters across the city center on Mangum Street. In 1980, one of America's most renowned historians came back to Durham to stay. John Hope Franklin had taught at North Carolina Central College, now NCCU, from 1943 to 1947 while working on his classic book, From Slavery to Freedom, A History of Negro Americans. My challenge, he said years later, was to weave into the fabric of American history enough of the presence of blacks so that the story of the United States could be told adequately and fairly. He spent most of his career at the University of Chicago, but moved back to Durham for a retirement, indulging his hobbies such as fly fishing and tending his vast collection of orchids. In 1983, he accepted a James B. Duke professorship at Duke, where a Center for Interdisciplinary and International Studies now bears his name. A native of Oklahoma, Franklin graduated from Fisk University and earned his PhD at Harvard. In addition to pursuing scholarship, he served on the NAACP legal team in the Brown versus Board of Education case. He served on the National Council of the Humanities and One America, the President's Initiative on Race. In 1995, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. Carl Whitman also arrived in Durham in 1980, a veteran of the civil rights and anti-war movements. He was a leader in the left-wing Students for a Democratic Society. Coming from San Francisco, Whitman was also a gay activist who had written the Gay Manifesto, one of the most influential documents of the gay liberation movement. Once in Durham, he became co-director of the North Carolina Public Interest Research Group and was a leader in Citizens for a Safer East Durham. That organization's pressure led to closing of the Armageddon chemical plant on Peabody Street, where chemical leakage had led to a massive explosion. Responding to a homophobic killing in the Little River in April of 1981, Whitman and others organized a demonstration at the Durham County Courthouse, followed by the city's first Gay Pride March that June. He was also a founding member of the North Carolina Lesbian and Gay Health Project, a collaboration between lesbians and gay men that was unusual at the time. Born and raised in New Jersey, Whitman became an activist while attending Swarthmore College and moved to become a labor organizer in San Francisco. Besides activism, he had a passion for dance, and with his partner, Alan Troxler, founded the Sun Assembly English Country Dancers, who are still dancing away. Another dancer was making a mark in Durham in the 1980s, Robert Chuck Davis.
Are you okay now? Yes.
A relative and considered America's master of African dance, Charles Rudolph Davis studied dance traditions at Howard University in Washington, D.C., before moving to New York City, where he studied under such major figures as Katherine Dunham, Earl Primus, and Martha Graham. He founded his own Chuck Davis Dance Company in 1968. The American Dance Festival brought Davis and his company to Durham, where he found a receptive community of dancers and formed the African American Dance Ensemble, which made its debut in 1984. In Durham, he was a performer, teacher, and outspoken champion for the arts. At 6 feet 5 inches and dressed in colorful African-style clothing, he was a prominent fixture at community events such as Bimbe, Kwanzaa, and Festival for the Eno. He traveled in Africa extensively for research and cultural exchanges, becoming known as the city's cultural arts ambassador. African traditions are based on respect, he told the Herald Sun of Durham in 2006. It is my way of fighting racism. At every available opportunity, he repeated his mantra: peace, love, and respect for everybody. Davis is known for founding Dance Africa, a festival held in New York each Memorial Day weekend since 1977. He was named one of the country's irreplaceable dance treasures by the Dance Heritage Coalition.
Everything is all about the community coming together to pay homage to the elders, to pay homage to that omnipotent force that each person believes in.
Durham's environmental consciousness had been raised by almost 2 decades of efforts by conservation groups such as the Eno River Association. In 1985, due in part to several association members, Durham received a state grant to conduct an inventory of the county's natural and cultural resources. Hildegard Riles led the committee charged with producing the inventory report, an exhaustive survey of natural areas, wildlife, graveyards, archaeological, and recreational sites. Riles went on to found the New Hope Creek Corridor Advisory Committee, a multi-jurisdiction group to protect the stream and its surroundings. She was also instrumental in establishing Lee Farm Historic Park in southern Durham and the Little River Regional Park in northern Durham and Orange counties. A Pennsylvanian by birth, Riles graduated from Mount Holyoke College and earned a master's degree in international studies at Johns Hopkins. Work at the American Conservation Association gave her a passion for environmental preservation, which she brought along when she came to Durham in 1972. For her work, she received the city's Golden Leaf Award and Preservation Durham's Bartlett Durham Award and the Triangle J Council of Governments Volunteer of the Year Award in 1986. As well as an environmentalist, Riles was a philanthropist and patron of the arts. She donated a collection of 18th and 19th century drawings and watercolors to Atlanta's High Museum of Art and established an environmental studies fund which bears her name at Mount Holyoke College. The 1980s brought some fresh energy downtown with construction of a new hotel and civic center and a drive to restore the old City Hall and Carolina Theater as an arts complex. Minor League Baseball returned to Durham Athletic Park at the old El Toro location at Morris and Corporation Streets. Durham got a shot of civic pride when the movie Bull Durham was filmed on location in 1987. The picture had a grand premiere at the Carolina the following summer. A handful of urban pioneers took up residence downtown, and businessman Franklin Wittenberg put up a blue glass office tower and parking deck across the loop from the Carolina Theater. But the Durham that had been took body blows in 1986 when the Irwin Mills textile complex closed and American Tobacco announced it would be shutting down its factory and leaving town. A second tobacco tradition was lost that year when the last of the city's auction houses sold its final leaf, unable to compete with larger markets in eastern North Carolina. Expansion at Duke Medical Center and at Research Triangle Park helped cushion the shock, even as they drew new residents from all around the world. The plight of Durham's homeless and needy received attention in the 80s from Urban Ministries of Durham, a coalition of churches' charitable projects which opened the community shelter for hope. The next decade brought creation of Triangle Residential Options for Substance Abuse, or TROSA, a 2-year residential jobs program for addicts and alcoholics. In 1995, Sharon Elliott Bynum founded Healing with Care to provide support, education, and empowerment to people with HIV or AIDS. In the following years, CARE on Broadway Street grew to serve more than 1,100 individuals each month, offering HIV/AIDS testing and case management, as well as medical and dental clinics, a community kitchen, food pantry, substance abuse treatment, financial literacy classes, and job readiness programs. A Durham native, Elliott Bynum created Healing with Care with her sister, the late Pat Amici. Before graduating from Northern High School, she had begun a nursing career by volunteering at the Lincoln Community Health Center through the Neighborhood Youth Corps. She went on to earn nursing degrees at Durham Tech, Watts School of Nursing, and North Carolina Central University. She also held a PhD in theology from Victory International College. Durham's district attorney, Shatana DeBerry, said of her, Sharon's vision was one of love, that everyone should have access to health care, to have a place to live. Durham's diversity has increased over the past 50 years, particularly with an influx of new residents from Latin America. In 1990, Latinos represented less than 1% of the city's population. According to current estimates, that proportion is now 14%. Attracted first by job opportunities in construction, the new residents have gone on to open businesses, add Central and South American flavors to the city's dining scene, and establish such Durham-based institutions as El Centro Hispano, a statewide resource and advocacy organization, and the Latino Community Credit Union. Tana Hoffman Ramirez was a passionate advocate for Latina women, helping them navigate the city's resources and overcome cultural isolation. A licensed psychologist in her native Mexico, Ramirez volunteered for 17 years at El Centro, where she worked on Café de Mujeres, the Women's Cafe, and Hablemos de Nuestra Salud. Let's talk about our health.